Today I wanted to do something different, and the main reason, or a big reason, is that it's summertime in the Pacific Northwest and wildfires have been running rampant. The air quality is awful, visibility is awful, there's no sunsets, there's no sunrises that you can make anything of. The waterfalls, the water flow throughout the region is gone down to next to nothing, and even the big falls have dramatically shrunk, and they just don't make compelling photographs. So that being said, I wanted to take and pull in a photograph I took at Little Tipsoo Lake at Mount Rainier National Park a couple of weeks ago and show you my editing process. So grab a cup of coffee or a drink, and let's dive in. When I was at Little Tipsoo Lake, if you haven't seen the video, I'll link it up here so you get a chance, go watch it so you can see, what I was photographing. But I did bracket my photos, and a lot of people might wonder when to bracket, not knowing when or how to do it. Also, why, when you're shooting raw, you can usually pull a lot of detail back. And so I'm going to show you the difference. We're going to process the photo, and we're going to stack it as an HDR in Lightroom, and we're going to edit the photograph from a single raw image, and then we're going to compare the two so you can see the difference. And the look is going to be almost absolutely identical, but one's going to be superior to the other, and I'll explain why as we get started. So at Little Tipsoo at sunset, it was extremely bright with the sun coming through up in this upper right. You can see that even at an 80th of a second, which is way underexposed, that I've still got some blown out parts up here in the upper right. But look how nice my sky looks overall. It looks really, really good. But the problem is there's absolutely nothing in this foreground. It's absolutely dark. It's black. So let's look at all of the bracketed exposures. So this is the one that's way underexposed, and then this would be the next one. This is a 40th of a second, so this is one stop brighter. You'll notice that it's blowing out even more up here, but there's just a little bit better visibility into the deep shadows down here. So we'll take and bring it up another stop, and this is all done in camera. This is just, again, opening that shutter twice as long. So we're at a 20th of a second, and you'll see that my sky is getting absolutely awful up here. And down here in my trees, now we can actually see that it's green grass, and we can start to see individual trees and this nice rock right here in the foreground. So let's brighten it up again. This is a 20th, so this will be a 10th of a second. So we're at a 10th, and now the sky is pretty much gone. There's no detail in the sky. It's just a white swath. Even the mountain is disappearing, although that everything here in the foreground is starting to look better and better every time. So we'll go one more stop. This is from a 10th to a 5th of a second. Now I can see green grass, I can see detail in my trees. If I zoom in on my trees, they look great. I can actually see the bark on the trees. I can see the trail on the other side of the lake. There's detail here. If I go into the foothills of Mount Rainier, foothills or the peaks here in the foreground or the midground, you can actually see detail there. Again, the trees, even the dark shadows are, recoverable, and it looks, you can see the little needles in the trees. So this is why a lot of first-time camera owners that buy a fancy camera go out and they become frustrated immediately when they see these amazing sunset photographs that other photographers, share on social media. Then they go out and try it, and it comes away looking like one of the underexposed shots that I showed you, or one of the ones where the sky is just solid bright. And they, well, like, how did they do it? What, I must need a better camera. And you really don't. You just need to understand the limitations of what you have. So your eye sees a lot more than your camera does as far as the dark darks and the bright brights. When I was there at Little Tipsoo, I could easily see how incredible the sunset was, and I could see all the detail in the grass and in the trees and the green and everything. I mean, everything looked great to my eye, but my camera's sensors just simply cannot put all of that into one photograph. It can't take that darkest dark and brighten it up and take that brightest bright and bring it down so that it looks like what I'm seeing with my naked eye. So in order to overcome that, what we have to do is we have to take a series of photographs that basically fill in those gaps. And 5 shots is what I usually do, just to cover my bases. And what that does is it accounts for, well, let's take one that's really overexposed so that we've got our dark shadows. The dark parts are going to be brighter. And then let's take one a little less, and then we get into, well, let's make sure that our sky looks good. So we're going to take a faster shutter speed, let's less light in, and it's going to make sure that we have a lot of detail in the sky without any of these really blown out white patches of nothingness. We always want detail there. And so bracketing is going to allow us to do that. Now you might say, well, RAW, why can't you just do everything in one photograph with a RAW? Because RAW records a lot more data. That's why you don't ever want to be shooting in JPEG if you're doing something like landscape photography or in a scene that's got a lot of dynamic range, that brightest bright to the darkest dark. So you want to be sure that you can recover all of that detail that you might lose because of the limitations of a single frame. You can do that because RAW is pretty amazing, especially with the new mirrorless cameras that are on the market today. If you take a look at this, this is a 1/5 of a second. This is my brightest shot. Even if I bring my highlights all the way down, it's still going to be not good. Even if I put a gradient up here, and I'm just going to go quickly to show you, there's no detail here. It's awful. You cannot recover from this. You can't recover those highlights from this photograph. You cannot. So let's go to the little bit slower or faster shutter speed. So this is a 1/10 of a second. Let's bring those highlights down. Now this is already better, but it's still not going to allow us to bring back all of those highlights that we want. No matter what I do, see this huge gash of ugliness and hideousness that it's never going to get back because the camera recorded solid white there. There's nothing to pull back. There's no detail. The camera couldn't record it. So let's take a look at the next one. This one was at a 20th of a second, okay? Another stop faster, another stop of light, less, darker, I should say. So let's pull this back. So we pull these back, and now look, we've actually already got, it's much, much, much better here. Let's take a look if we go in and maybe if we add a gradient to this and see what happens if we pull this back even further. And it's better. We still got some areas that are just solid white though. It's better, but it's not quite there. And let's take a look at this one. All right, this one is a 40th of a second. And let's bring these highlights down and take a look. If you look up here in the clouds, I'm going to zoom in. All of a sudden I have detail. This is blue sky. I actually have a little bit of cloud back there. Now over here, this is exactly where the sun was. This is the sun ray. See the sunburst coming out of here. The sun is the brightest thing in our solar system, and when it's in the frame of your camera, there's no way for it not to be solid bright, and that's okay. I'm okay with that because it's the sun. I just don't want any of the stuff that's around it to be absolutely destroyed and blown out and unrecoverable. So I'm okay with this. All right, but look at my foreground. My sky is okay, but the foreground is way, way too dark. So what we can do is, well, let's just bring the shadows up. So if I bring the shadows up, all of a sudden it's better as well. But it's still way, 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 way too dark. So we can do a gradient this way, and we can bring the exposure up quite a bit. And again, This is on a single raw file is all that I'm processing. Okay, now let's just cut this off. So let's look at a before and after of this one shot. So this is before. This is what I started with. And then with just 10 seconds, I moved to this. Now this is by no means a final edit, but I just wanted to show you what you can recover. This is just with one file. So my foreground's looking a little bright for me, and we're going to fix that real quick. I'll go back to my graduated filter adjustment, click on this one that I want to adjust, and instead of a whole stop, let's bump this down a little bit, probably somewhere around there. That looks better. That's like a half a stop brighter. That looks much more like what my eyes actually saw when I was standing at Little Tipsoo Lake. So now that I've got the basic edits on this one shot, let's take, and we're going to do it a different way. We're going to take those bracketed shots, all 5 of them, in Lightroom, and we're going to have Lightroom stack them into a single image. It's called an HDR, high dynamic range. And basically it's going to make sure that it pulls in all of the detail from the areas that it needs to. The computer looks at like, well, let's pull in, you know, make sure we don't blow out any of the highlights. Let's make sure we keep all that detail. And then we keep all of the shadow detail as well in those, in the shots where we need to pull the shadow back. So it's going to keep the best of all of those photographs and it's going to put it into one. To do an HDR in Lightroom is extremely easy. All you have to do is you're going to select your first photograph. So this is the underexposed by 2 stops at 1/80th of a second. And then we're going to pick the next one. Hold your Command or Control if you're on a Mac, and you're going to select the next one, which would be the 40th of a second. Then the next one, the next one, and the next one. So you should have, in my case, I've got 5 images, and I should have 5 images selected. Right click, and you'll say Photo Merge HDR. Thing that you always want to make sure of is that Auto Align is checked. Do not check Auto Settings. You do not want that because Lightroom's going to automatically add all of what it thinks it needs to look like, and we're going to take control of that. We don't want Lightroom to apply any adjustments to it. We'll take care of that. So Auto Align, deghost amount is only relevant if you've got moving things in your image, if it's a waterfall or if it's something moving in the wind, a flag or something like that. But this was pretty static, and these were taken very, very fast. My slowest shutter speed was like a 40th, or I'm sorry, a 5th of a second. My fastest was an 80th. So that's all pretty quick. It was boom, 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 and it was done. So I really don't have to worry about deghosting at all. I'm going to leave that alone and do it at none, and then I'll just click Merge. You are left with this. This is the HDR that Lightroom created, and you're looking at it going, well, it looks awful. It looks like just the exposure that we had pretty much at 0, right? So if we take a look at like this one, it almost looks the same. This is one raw file, and here is our HDR file. And you'd be right. But the thing is, Lightroom didn't apply any of this automatic settings, and it's taken the best of all of those images and allow us to recover everything. Let me show you how magical this is. So if you notice up in my sky, we're going to do the same things, but it's going to be much, much better quality-wise. We're going to take and bring our highlights down, and notice that blown totally, right? But if I bring it down to -100, I'm not going to keep it there, but all the detail is there because it's pulling across the range it's merged all 5 of those files together. So that's probably a little bit much. I would like a little bit more than that. So I'm going to bring this back somewhere probably around there. And then I am going to look at the foreground. And again, I'm just going to take my shadows and bump those up and look at what the shadows do on an HDR file. It's just huge. But again, we're not going to leave it at 100. We're going to back this off somewhere around to, I don't know, like, let's do around 85 or so, something like that. And let's add a little bit of contrast. One thing that always happens or most of the time, anytime you bring highlights down and you bring your shadows up, you're going to lose some contrast, and it starts to give it a washed out look. So a good rule of thumb is when you're dealing with HDRs or you're blending images in this way, is to always add just a little bit of contrast. So let's bump contrast up just a little bit, and we can zoom in here to these mountains and see what we're doing a little bit better. You can see how going to 100 really and back to, you know, minus, just watch how it just brings out detail. But we don't want to go overboard with it. So again, probably somewhere around in there looks pretty good. The other thing we would want to do, or I would like to do, is maybe add just a little bit of dehaze. Again, not a lot, just a little bit, somewhere around 12, just to bring back even a little bit more detail in these mountains. So that's pretty much going to be the bulk of what I would do. I would finesse some things. So now we're going to compare the two side by side. We've edited both, one from a single raw file, the other was an HDR stack that we used from 5 exposures and we created in Lightroom. So let's take a look at them side by side. Now I did crop in a little bit on both of them, and they're not exactly exact as far as the crop, but it's very, very close. So the one on the left is the HDR, the one on the right is the single raw exposure, and they look extremely similar as far as our tonality, what we were able to recover, but the devil is in the details. And when we zoom in, what you'll find is that when we get up into some of the mountain areas back here in the background, now I hope it'll show up on the YouTube video. If it doesn't, you're going to have to trust me. But I can promise you that if I'm looking at this on my monitor, the one from the single file, there's a lot of noise in this shadow. There is a ton more than it is in this left-hand file. The HDR is just much, much, much cleaner than the one on the right. But you say, like, wait, James, you said we used ISO 100, we shouldn't have any noise. Well, ISO 100 is by far, yes, it's going to be your base ISO for most cameras, and it's going to give you the best quality. However, when you're shooting into deep shadows and you're bringing those shadows way, way up, you're just cranking that, it's still trying to create something out of almost nothing, and you're going to pull noise from those shadows no matter what ISO you're using. So the rule is you're going to have to bracket when you're dealing with extreme conditions. And although a raw file can pull back a lot of detail and do an admirable job, especially for if you're just going to post it on social media, it's probably not going to matter because the file size and the size that people are going to be looking at it is going to be so small on a phone or whatever that it just doesn't matter. But if you're going to print something, you're going to print it big. If it's for a client, if it's for something for yourself that you wanted to print or hang on a wall, I would definitely recommend that you think about bracketing those photos to make sure that you don't introduce noise or other stuff, just aberrations and things, and you get the best quality that you possibly can. Well, that'll wrap it up for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions about the process or Lightroom, how I did it, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer your questions. I offer online tutoring in Lightroom and Photoshop one-on-one via Zoom or any other platform that you might be comfortable using. Hit me up, just drop me an email or leave a comment below and I will make sure to get in touch with you so that we can schedule something. Lightroom can be daunting, but I can promise you that once you get the hang of it, it will change the way that you create photographs. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. It really, really helps me out. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.